Certain houses take a liking to certain people. It follows that for each house there are some people it takes a dislike to. But a house keeps a straight face. You can't tell what it's thinking just by looking at it from the street. Does it matter whether something happened there long ago? Well, you could easily say that about every place. Terrible crimes can be found anywhere if you look back far enough. Once committed, do they become any less terrible with the passage of time? No. When a house takes against you, it's most likely to be personal. This particular house was not lonely. It was not derelict. It was not overgrown. Its windows did not glower. Twice a day the children of the local school passed it, filling the air with shouts and laughter. It was painted well enough. It was weeded well enough. It was stamped from the same mould as the others either side of it, though all houses differ from all others. By the time Julia arrived at this house, it was already well past 11 o'clock at night. The street seemed to be asleep, and the street lamps lit a scene of stillness in yellow. She stood at the gate with her nephew, Shorthouse. It amused her to call him by his childhood nickname, despite his having grown in adulthood to a respectably middling height. "Have you got the keys?" Julia wanted to know. "Of course I have," said Shorthouse. He fumbled around for them. There was enough light, but there were deep shadows that swallowed up whatever he fished out of his pockets. First his house keys, then the keys to his shop. Perhaps now these were the set he wanted. "This one," he said, and pushed it at the keyhole. It went halfway in and jammed. He heard his aunt make the smallest possible noise. He tried another, and then forgot which ones he had already tried. He tried again with the one that he thought he had tried first, but this time the barrel in the lock turned, and the door moved ajar. There. He felt that something behind the door was resisting him opening it. When he had got it fully open, very little was revealed. A short, narrow hallway, he supposed, but lost in shadow. "Where's the light?" asked Julia, over his shoulder. Shorthouse felt for it, found it, and flicked it. Nothing happened. "Fuse board," he said. "Don't worry, I'll find it." He walked straight in, and at once felt the ground move against him, turning his ankle over. He braced himself against the walls to avoid slipping. "I'll be really careful, there's a load of junk mail down here." It felt like a barrier of envelopes, free papers, takeaway menus, and cab cards. He had shifted some of it aside with the door, but it was slippery and treacherous underfoot. After a few more steps, feeling for solid floor, he turned back to check on the silhouette of his aunt. She was less than certain on her legs these days, but seemed to be doing well enough. Then they were in what appeared to be a living room. Even in the dim light, they knew it was cluttered and untidy, and they would have to go carefully until they could get the lights back on. "Where did you find this place?" said Julia. "On the internet." "I hope you've got a good deal." "You haven't got a torch, have you?" Shorthouse replied. "Look, have a sit down here. Let me sort the electrics out. I don't want you tripping over anything." He moved a pile of magazines off one of the cushions of the sofa. What kind of magazines were they? He couldn't make any out. In the darkness he gestured for Aunt Julia to sit there, and the implication was to let him concentrate. She held one arm of the sofa and stepped over something on the floor. It was an indeterminate black obstacle about the size of a cat, when they heard a loud crash from upstairs. It was probably not really that loud, but in the pitch dark, close to midnight, in a strange house, when you believe that you are alone, even a moderate sound seems very loud indeed. Julia and Shorthouse looked at each other. They could see that the other was looking back, but they could not see each other's faces. "There's someone upstairs," Julia whispered. "Probably just a bird or something got in the window." Shorthouse tried to say out loud, but he also whispered. "I'll have a look." Julia caught his sleeve. "No, let's stay together. I don't want to be left behind." So Shorthouse found himself leading his aunt carefully and quietly up the stairs, eyes wide in the blackness, wondering what he was going to do if there was a squatter dossing down in one of the beds. He had no weapon, and in any case no real track record of physical courage. They ascended, step by step. He hoped that the noise had been caused by some small, innocuous thing, or if it was an intruder, that they would be frightened off by the loud voice of a legally entitled tenant. On the landing they stopped and listened for the direction of any more noises. As Shorthouse's eyes adjusted, the deep gloom slowly revealed 3 doors, 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, as advertised, although he was not sure which was which. Aunt Julia and Shorthouse stood very still for a little while, until he believed he could hear the grating roar of the sea, which must have been more than a mile away. In this stillness they then heard a long, snuffling, rattling snort. It was the sound, perhaps, of sinuses destroyed by long years of sleeping outdoors, scoured of their natural fluids by harsh, dry winters, and then clogged up with the residues of a bad diet, drugs, alcohol, and city pollution. Shorthouse tightened up. The sound had come from the room at the front of the house. There was nothing else he could do now but confront it. In a way, this dispelled some of the fear. The unknown terror in the darkness had resolved itself in his imagination into the form of a tramp, tough and irascible, but nevertheless a tangible adversary. Thus Shorthouse was suddenly cast in an action scene rather than a nightmare. He ushered his aunt through another door, the bathroom, he guessed, to keep her away from any trouble. Then he kicked open the door to the bedroom and gave a great yell. A sudden show of power was more important than any words he might say, and he balled his hands into doubtful fists. On the edge of the bed was perched a figure. The curtains were open and the street lights illuminated the scene, as if Shorthouse had been lost in a great and ancient forest and had now stumbled into a clearing brightly lit by moonlight. The figure was ugly, weather-beaten, and probably the recipient of many literal beatings too, pot-bellied under the mess of ragged clothes that were surely home to colonies of mites and fleas. He looked up with a mixture of fear and defiance, and with some difficulty stood up. Shorthouse only now caught the rancid smell in the room, surely more than just the body odour of one man, as if the bedclothes had not been changed in years, a stink of mothballs and old sweat. The tramp rushed at Shorthouse. Shorthouse took an unpractised swing at the tramp and knocked him against the door frame. He staggered past him onto the landing and past the bathroom door, mouthing a string of incoherent curses. "This is my house," Shorthouse heard among all the obscenities and blasphemies, and then, "You get out! You get out!" And then Shorthouse became aware that he himself had been shouting, "Get out! Get out! Get out! Get out!" over and over again, maybe from the moment he had burst into the room. He must have been shouting it very loud, as he felt his voice was already raucous and sore. The tramp was gone. He hadn't heard him clatter down the stairs, but he felt a cold waft coming up from below, where he must have left the front door open. Shorthouse opened the bathroom door a crack. Aunt Julia? He called gently. But on pushing it further, he realised that his earlier guess was wrong, and this door, in fact, gave on to the second bedroom, which appeared to be in no better state than the first, but was entirely unoccupied. Aunt Julia? He called, stepping back onto the landing. Where are you? He's gone. I chased him off. It's all right to come out now. Aunt Julia? He turned the handle of the third door, which opened onto the bathroom. Even in this dim light, he could see it was dingy. At first, it seemed to him that nobody was in there, but then his eyes made out a figure lying in the bath, slender and white like a skeleton. I'm here, she whispered in a trembling voice. Let me help you up. At the top of the stairs, Shorthouse felt an arm slipping into his, hardly more than a bone. It reminded him that his aunt, though she could be feisty, was also elderly and frail. A fright like this could be a serious danger to her. He comforted her with words as they made their way down the dark staircase together. She was quiet, as if processing what had happened. He made to close the front door, but it was already shut. I'll go and find the fuse box, Shorthouse said gently, once he'd sat her back down on the sofa. I don't want to be left behind, she whispered. I'll only be a minute, he said. We need to get some lights on in here. It'll cheer the place up. I don't want to be left behind. Again. Shorthouse looked at her as best as he could. Look, why don't we go, he said. We're not going to get a wink of rest in here anyway. Listen, I'll drive us to a hotel. We passed one coming off the motorway. You can't stay here. I don't want to be left behind. Of course I'm not going to leave you behind. Come on, let's get you up and into the car. Easy now. So they took their leave of that place, whatever it was. Shorthouse resolved to go online and give it a negative review. He shut the front door firmly and turned to walk down the path. Where had his aunt gone? There was nowhere to go. She wouldn't have had time to get down the path and through the gate. Even so, he walked to the gate and bent over it to look up and down the street. Had he left her in the house? No, she'd gone out ahead of him. He knew he was still shaken, but he wasn't addled. Still, he'd better check. He found the right key first time, put it back in the lock, turned it, and opened the door again into the dark hallway. He called out for her while he made his way back across the pool of papers and up the stairs, but got no answer. He could not explain it. Where was she? And why ever had she changed rooms when he was confronting the tramp? He put his hand on the handle of the bathroom door. He didn't remember either of them closing it, but it's odd what you do in a heightened state, he thought. I don't want to be left behind. He heard the whisper distinctly over his shoulder. There was nobody behind him. She couldn't have gone back to the other bedroom, could she? He went on into the murky bathroom, and this time saw with clarity his Aunt Julia lying in the bath, covering her head as if cowering from something. It's all right, he said, putting his hand on hers. It's all over now. You've had a bad fright. Now I'm taking you somewhere safe. He removed her hand gently from her face. His aunt put up no resistance. Very soon it was clear to him that she was quite dead. He looked at her wide stare and at her hands and arms that he now realised had been clasped over her eyes and ears as if trying desperately to block something out. He did not hear the bathroom door closing slowly behind him. It's hard to say why a tree root on occasion will grow right into a wall when there are far easier paths it could have chosen. The tree has its reasons, I suppose. Certainly it's not malice that drives it between the cracks in the stones, nor necessity either. A place can be like that. Certain houses dislike certain people. That's all.